So I came across Justin's design on Twitter not so long ago. As you can see, it looks really nice. It's basically just a little wallet, and inside you have this metal card. And it was just an image, but I immediately started thinking, how could we bring this to life with Framer? And I jumped inside of Framer and I actually started animating it, and as you can see, I came up with this. As you can see, you can just click and the metal card just pops out of this wallet, and then you can like hover to have this like 3D shiny rotation and everything, and then you just click and it goes back into its place. So yeah, in this video I'm going to show you how this interaction was created. It will be really helpful if you want to take your, I don't know, Framer animation skills to the next level, because we're going to talk about a technique called rollover. So if you don't know that, or you need a little bit more clarity on how it works, I think this video will be super helpful for you. So my name is Nandi, this is Framer University, and let's get started. So as you can see, we are here inside of Framer, and it's really important that you're going to be able to follow along with this video. There's going to be a remix link in the description that you can click, and once you duplicated the project onto your account, you're going to find on the left panel pages, and then if you click starter, you're going to exactly see what I'm seeing right here, and you can kind of start building with me and learn along the way. But I'm going to go back to the tutorial page because it is dedicated to me. And so let's start recreating this. First of all, I just want to highlight that this video will not be about how to like recreate this visual effect on the metal card, how to make it like realistic and stuff like that, because I have other videos that explain that. So if you're interested in those, make sure to check the description. I'm going to link a few of those videos. And I'm also not going to talk about how I created this this leather wallet because I just made it with AI. So it was really simple. I can actually show you the process. I just saw that this is the original, on the inspiration, but I was like, I kind of like this a little bit more, like this form. It has this like depth on the sides and this stitching, and it looks a little bit better in my opinion. This is a bit too flat. However, I really enjoyed the leather material. So I literally just, screenshotted this and then also put this into ChatGPT 4 and asked that, hey, please return this image, but with this leather texture. And as you can see, it did exactly that. And then the Framer logo, as you can see, it's just an element here inside of Framer. It's not any special. It has a little like fill color, drop and inner shadows to make it look a little bit more like 3D. Basically that's how these are created. One more thing that I might mention before we jump right into animating this and creating the interaction is, in order to have like a nice like light effect on the card, as you can see, it not only rotates in 3D, but the light is also moving in accordance with the rotation. So that is created with a component from Framer University. It's called parallax floating, and as you can see, it is placed within this light. So if I turn this visibility to no, you can see this is the light. It's literally just a little frame. As you can see, it has an opacity and it's a radial fill. That's basically it. Nothing special. Blending is overlay, a little blur on it, and to make it a little bit more smooth. And this is basically moved with the parallax floating component. If you don't know Framer University, I highly recommend checking it out. As you can see, parallax floating is just one of a few hundred components that I have on this site. So yeah, you're probably gonna find it helpful, so make sure to check it out. Yeah, basically that's all the things about like the visual effects and stuff like that. Now let's talk about how to actually create this. Where I click it, it moves up and then back down, and I can hover and it has this nice effect, and I can click it and it goes back. How can we create interactions like this inside the Framer? Well, let's quickly see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first just assemble the structure here on the canvas. I'm going to put this metal, which is actually, I don't know why it's called metal card. I'm going to call it a wallet instead. and I'm going to put it here on the canvas. I'm going to put the metal card right next to it. And what you also have to understand about the structure of the wallet is that it is made up of 2 layers, front and back, because if you look at the original, the card has to be in between the front and the back. And that's why we have to kind of separate this wallet into two parts, because then if I basically just copy and paste this metal card, so I can just press Command and X on my keyboard, and I can put it somewhere within this wallet. Now, as you can see, it doesn't really look cool because it's relatively positioned, and it's like I can reorder these and stuff like that. I don't want to place this within the flow. I want to make sure that it's absolutely positioned so I can move it anywhere and it's not pushing other elements away. So now, as you can see, I can nicely position it where it should be positioned. And here it's really important to have a great z-index layering, because, for example, the back, it has z-index 0. As you can see, no z-index is specified, but I can specify the z-index. I can set it to 1, for example. The front, as you can see, it's 2, but I can set it to 3. And then the metal card is right in between those 2 values. It's 2 or 1. So if I mess this up, if I set the z-index of metal card to a larger value, as you can see, it's gonna, appear above everything. So, and also if it's too low, then it's gonna go below everything. So it has to sit right in between those 2 layers, so it appears, realistic. I can also move it in between on the layers panel here on the left, to make sure that we also have a nice visual representation there. Then I'm pressing Option and H, but if you're not a fan of shortcuts, you can also press it here. It's going to just horizontally center this element. And then we can just see what we like. Maybe we're going to put it somewhere here. I don't know how much you want to move it up, but something like this could potentially look really nice. So at this point we have everything. It's nicely structured. We have one simple frame that we can turn into a component and start animating it. So what you have to understand in Framer is that we are usually creating these interactions by creating components with multiple variants. We are making changes on those variants by moving elements, changing opacity, scale, and stuff like that. And then we connect those variants with interactions like mouse enter, click, or stuff like that. And that's how Framer smartly animates between those variants. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to just call this main component. And I'm going to press Option, Command, and K on my keyboard to create a component. But you can also, again, if you're not a fan of shortcuts, you can right-click and create a component. And yeah, here we are on the component canvas where we can create those variants that I was talking about. So this is the default variant, so we can just rename this to default. And I just remembered one thing that we forgot to add, because it is really important that if we want this 3D effect on the card, we cannot simply just put the metal card inside here, because it requires an additional component to add the effect. So if you go to the Framer.Universe website and search for 3D look, you can simply copy this component and paste it on the canvas. So this is what I'm going to do. And some of the components of Framer Universe, they work in a way that you have to put it within the frame that you want to add an effect to, and it will add the effect to the frame. But this works in a way that you have to connect the element that you want to add the effect to this component. So essentially the way it works is we have to now, after positioning it properly, we have to unfortunately move this out. So we kind of can just remember the value here. For example, on the bottom we had 70 on the absolute positioned metal card frame, and we can just press Command and X. We can put it right here, and then we can instead put this 3D look component inside here. We're gonna have the same size, the same position, everything. So it was 12 on the sides, I remember. We have to set the width to fit, I think, to be able to set these values. And on the bottom it was 70. The only thing that we don't really know is the size of the height. So I'm going to check it here. It's 341. So I'm going to go here and set 341. And again, it's really important to set the z-index to 2 so it's properly set up. So one thing that is a little bit weird here, you can see that as I'm resizing this component, this placeholder frame is not really resizing with it. Please ignore that, it's a mistake by me. So yeah, the code has to be updated, but essentially once we connect this metal card to the component, as you can see, it appears right there as it should. Basically we don't have any visual difference now. However, now as you can see, as I'm moving my cursor, it kind of starts moving around. So this is exactly what we will need. However, I'm going to set up the 3D look a little bit differently. I'm going to actually remove the front for a second so that we can see how it looks. As you can see, it's moving, but it doesn't really look 3D. The reason why it doesn't look 3D is because the 3D look component on the right panel has to be set up with perspective. So you have to add perspective distortion, yes, and then we can also add dragging behavior, which we don't really need in this case, rotation limit and stuff like that, so we can create all sorts of different effects with this component. But I'm going to set probably the sensitivity to a little bit larger value. As you can see, now it looks nice in 3D. Yeah, I think this looks really nice. Actually, now that I'm looking at this effect, I realize that this is not really what we have on the original, because you can see here, when I'm hovering here around, it's not really looking. Here, it's looking. And also, when I hover, it scales up and then has this effect. So we need a little bit different component. Sorry, I forgot this, but maybe it was actually helpful for you to also know about the 3D look component. But actually, we're going to use something else in this case, which is called just 3D hover. So we can just search for 3D hover component, and this is going to be the one that we actually need. So I'm going to click copy component, and essentially it works the same way. It just adds a little bit different effect. It doesn't have dragging behavior and rotation limit and stuff like that. I mean, it has a rotation limit, but not limited to X and Y. So yeah, again, it's a little bit different. I can paste this on the canvas, and if you did the same thing and you pasted in the 3D look before, like with me, and now you have to replace it, there's a really cool hack for doing that, because I could just remove this and then add it, there, but that takes a little bit more time. What we can do is we can just delete the component, just paste it on the canvas and delete it. So now it's within our project, and I can right click and replace with Frame University and 3D hover. So instead of 3D look, we want to have 3D hover. And as you can see, now the metal card is still connected because it has the same connecting behavior. And yeah, but now it just has different properties on the right panel. You can see here we can set gravitate or evade. So basically how it's gonna behave when I'm like hovering over it. And we also have tilt limit. I'm gonna set it to 20. So it's basically how much is it moving and tilting when I'm hovering over. And the scale is, just the scale, how much is it being scaled up when we hovering over it. And the perspective is how much of a 3D effect we have. The lower the value, the more crazy the effect is. So probably I'm going to just increase it a little bit. Maybe 1000 will be good. Yeah, so this looks really nice. However, we have a little problem, and I don't really remember how I solved this, because you can see that when we see the default, I don't really want to have, actually I don't really even have the effect, which is really nice. Okay, that's actually great. So because I was worried that, when the card is within the wallet, I don't really want to, you can see, actually I can trigger it. There's a specific point where I can trigger it, and I don't want to be able to trigger it. So the way I'm gonna solve this, I think, is I'm gonna set this 3D hover component on the right panel to styles pointer events none. So this basically means that we literally we cannot hover it. I mean, we can hover it, like we can move our cursor above, but it's not really gonna register the interaction. It's not gonna do anything. And so on the variant where we need the interaction, we're just gonna set the pointer events back to auto, so it's gonna nicely work. So none by default. Yeah, that looks really nice. Front will be back, And I think we're all good. Yeah, we cannot trigger it here, which is absolutely great. So yeah, at this point we can just create another variant to create this interaction. So what's really interesting about this effect and why we're learning about a rollover in this case is because it's not a simple interaction where an element moves from point A to point B, because for that you just need two variants and you animate between them. However, in this case, if you take a look, I click, the card will first move up and then back down. So as you can see, the animation has two states. So, you might be thinking, how can I create something like this? How can I make sure that the animation follows a specific path and then ends up at point, B, but in the meantime, it's gonna, hit in between points in the animation. So this can be created in Framer really easily with the rollover technique. So I'm gonna show you how that's done. First of all, you have to create all the variants that we need. So I'm gonna click here, variant. We created a new variant, and I'm gonna call it out. Okay, I don't know what I was doing. I have to rename this. So Command R, and I'm gonna rename it to out. And I'm not even gonna call it out. I'm gonna call it mid start because it's the middle state, and the start you're gonna understand why we call it start. So this is what we see when we move from point A to point B when we initially hover. So this is where the card just simply moves up. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this 3D hover element and I'm going to start moving it up with my arrow keys. Since it's absolutely positioned, I can do it really easily. So I will move it up somewhere here. Yeah, it looks really nice. And then once I have this, I don't have to think about any interactions yet, nothing. I just click here again and I create a new variant. And here we're going to move the element back. This will be called, by the way, end. So, we have default, mid, start, and end. This is where the animation ends. Here we move it back. So let me see what was the original position. 70 on the bottom. So 70 on the bottom. It moves back. However, one thing we forgot to do is we have to move it above the wallet at this stage. So the trick will be that here it is going to be z index larger, so z index 4 or something like that on the end, and then the front and the back, as you can see, will be scaled down because the wallet actually hides behind this metal card. So that is what we're gonna do. I don't know if we actually scale this card up or not. Yeah, maybe we scale it up a little bit. So the 3D hover will be scaled. So transform scale a little bit bigger, maybe 1.1. The pointers will be auto, so it's interactive. And the front and the back side of this wallet will be scaled down to something a little bit smaller, so it is basically hiding. So yeah, and actually now that I'm looking at this, maybe we wanna move the 3D like the metal card in itself to a little bit lower position. So maybe we center it here. Yeah, maybe, and then we scale these down a little bit more. Yeah, I think this could look really nice. And let me see. Yeah, it is interactive on that state. So now that we have the default mid, start, and end, let's see how can we actually create this interaction. So we just have to think about when we want to move from one variant to the other. What we knew for sure is that from default to mid start, we want to move on a click, because as you can see, when I hover over this and click, it moves there. Now I can just hover over this little thingy right here. There's a little icon, as you can see. With this we can connect interactions. So we want to go from default to mid start, and it's going to ask when we want to do that. But we want to do that on click. So that's it. Now when we click default and we click here, as you can see, we just move up. I don't know what was that little jump back at the start, but as you can see, it works nicely, it moves up. However, on the original, as you can see, it's a little bit smoother, it's a little bit slower as well. So on the transition settings, we can just set this to maybe 8 and 0 bounce, we can check that. So we're setting that on the default primary variant in the right transition settings. And yeah, I actually like this. I think this looks really nice. It's a little bit slower, but yeah, I like this. So now the question is, now that we moved to mid start, how do we roll over from that variant to the next one, end? Well, we're gonna implement an interaction here. As you might have guessed, we just connect from mid start to end. Before I do that, sorry for jumping around, but we forgot to do something. When we connect an interaction from the primary variant, it's gonna be applied to all variants, which is not really good, right? Because now the mid start also has a click interaction that takes it to itself, the mid start, and end also has a click interaction that takes it to the mid start, which is again not good. So if I click here, it's a mess. So in this case, we always have to remove these interactions because we only want to add it to the primary. So now, again, back to where we were. We have to connect from mid start to the end. And this is the point where we have to kind of think about when do we want to move from mid start to end? Because it's not a specific like interaction like click or click start or mouse enter, mouse leave. It's going to be this option right here, appear, because appear essentially kind of animates or triggers this animation automatically when the mid start appears on the screen. So what's going to happen is I click default, it animates to mid start. So now mid start variant appeared on the screen, and that triggers a rollover to the end. However, what you're going to notice, and you're going to probably run into this issue many times when you're doing this yourself, because it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around this point or this part of the rollover technique, because if we just do an appear from mid start to end, it's not gonna work. As you can see, I click this and it goes to the end from the default when I click. So we miss the mid start, we just skip it. And yeah, it's a little bit hard to understand, but basically the reason why this is happening is because when we click the default, the mid start immediately appears on the screen. So I click this and it's immediately mid start. We have not animated to the final state of mid start, so the card did not move up, but technically in the background the variant is already mid start. However, you know, it has a transition. So if you click mid start, you see it has a transition. It takes 0.8 seconds to go up. So the card to animate up, it takes 0.8 seconds. So with the appear effect, we have to wait a little bit. We cannot trigger it immediately, because that way we're just gonna go straight from the first variant to the last one. We have to wait with this appear a little bit to leave time for the animation to play out. And I hope that makes sense. But in this case, we can set something like 0.4 or something like that. We can experiment with these values. The more you set, the more you're going to wait, of course. So I'm going to set 0.4 for now to see how it looks. Now, as you can see, it moves up and then it moves down. However, I feel like it could wait a little bit more, because it's like a little bit fast, like goes up and it comes down immediately. So maybe the appear delay is 0.7. I don't know. We can again experiment with this. Yeah, I think this looks really nice. It waits a little bit and then moves down. As you can see, this is the secret of the rollover technique. Many people get this wrong because they forget setting the delay here on the appear, or they set the delay here on the transition settings, which is again not gonna work. The appear effect has to be, or the appear interaction has to be delayed to leave time for the animation to play out. So we animated the mid start and then wait a little bit and then animate to the last variant, which is the end. So now, as you can see, if we click here, it appears. You can scale the card up. Nice, works really nicely. And Now we just have to make sure that somehow when we click end, we go back to the default. And you could say, okay, that's pretty simple. We just, connect end to mid start on click, and then you start thinking, okay, wait. And then I go from mid start to default on appear, but we already have an appear effect on this, which takes us to the end. So, on one element, we cannot really have an appear effect taking us to variant A and also to variant B, because it's not going to be able to decide where it should be going, because we don't know if we are coming from the end or coming from the default. So this is where we have to come up with a little trick, which is going to be creating another variant, which is exactly going to be the same variant that we have here on mid start. I'm just going to duplicate it. Boom. And this is going to be called mid back. So you see, we use mid start to go to the end, and then we use mid back to come back from the end. So the only change that we do is we go from the end to the mid back on click, and then from the mid back, the appear effect will not take us to the end variant, but it is going to take us to the default. The delay and everything else will stay the same, and that's how it's going to work. Click, moves up, interaction works nicely, and if I click again, it moves up and then back down. However, we start noticing something a little bit weird, because when I'm clicking this, it moves down nicely. However, when we go back, as you can see, the card moves back behind this front element a little bit sooner than it should. I think you probably also noticed it, and that's not really gonna work nicely. So how do we fix this little issue? It's really simple. As you remember, on mid start, we already changed the 3D hover to a larger z-index. Actually, we did not. Oh, okay, I know what is the problem. Yeah, we only changed the 3D hover to a larger z-index on the end. So here, on the end, it is above the wallet. However, as we click this and we move to mid-back, the z-index is instantly changing. So it hasn't moved up already, it's just here, but it's already moving back because the z-index is dropped back to z-index 2. So all you have to do is we have to set the z-index to 4 here, so it's still above the wallet while it's moving up. And when it's up there, it is now safe to change itself back to z-index 2 when it eventually moves back down on the default variant. As you can see here, it's set to z-index 2. So now, hopefully, it's gonna work nicely. I can click, I can hover, I can click again, and yeah, the interaction just works perfectly. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I really do hope that it was helpful and you were able to learn about framer interactions, rollover technique, and I think that if you learn this properly, you can really create crazy interactions in Framer that are not just boring point A to point B movements, but they have some sort of, a little bit more of an exciting visual effect, just like in this wallet interaction case. So yeah, again, I hope that it was helpful. If you have any questions about this or you got stuck somewhere, make sure to drop a comment below. I'll make sure to answer you guys. And also make sure to remix the project down in the description. And yeah, check out Framer University. So if you go to framer.university, you're going to find a bunch of resources, these components that we are using here, the parallax hover, the 3D look, the 3D hover, all of these are free components available on the Framer University website. And I have over 450 resources that all of them are free. And in my honest opinion, they are pretty high quality. So yeah, make sure to check those out as well. And yeah, I think that's it for this video. Make sure to like it, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.